God bless my heart. I don't remember how many books I read this year. Hi everyone, my name is 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓵. Welcome to my channel. I hope this light will not disturb us as well as my kitchen environment. Today is a really hot day here in Ukraine and I'm gonna do a mid-year book freakout tag, which I'm a bit late with, but it's a good way to highlight the most fascinating or disappointing moments in my reading journey in the first half of this year. So in the first half of this year, I read 201 book and 171 book from this number were graphic novels. So they were single issues graphic novels. I think 2 or 3 of them were, and other one were, you know, just graphic novels or parts of manga series. I'm bad with math, but I kind of can calculate that 30 books that I read were not graphic novels. So we will talk about them in a separate wrap-up, I think, because I didn't do a wrap-up yet for these 30 books that were not graphic novels and not a part of my challenge to read 1 graphic novel per day in 2021. So let's focus on the main point of my reading journey this year and start with the first question, which is best book you have read so far in 2021, and without any hardness in my heart, I can say that it's a love series by Federico Brrémaud and Federico Bertolucci, which is not a single book, but it's a series of kind of shorter graphic novels, silent graphic novels, mind you, that fascinated me and made me fall in love with this subgenre of graphic novels, which is silent or wordless graphic novels. It's a graphic perfection for me and a great storytelling without using a single word. So the best sequel I have read so far in 2021, that's a hard question, but I would say that even I'm not a big on series, and I promised myself to not start any series that is not finished yet, to not break my heart in waiting for the next installment. I broke this promise and I don't really regret it, because I started to read Fans, focusing on a guy who was raised by a single mother and his father is a famous fencer. So fencing is his hobby and he really wants to prove something to himself and to the father who abandoned him. So he is really want to compete in Olympics, I guess. For this, he has taken this hard and long road of success from the local fencing club towards the elite fencing school, private school, which he's enrolled in with a special scholarship. There he meets a lot of like-minded people for whom fencing is also a really important thing, and all of them have kind of, you know, high stakes into forming the school fencing team and then winning over other schools to compete in the different, bigger and more serious fencing competition. Every student has their backstory, and not only he finds friends and frenemies there, but also he has this kind of romantic line with his biggest nemesis, with who he shares the room. So it has a lot of, you know, all of these tropes which we often see in romance and male-on-male romance and fanfiction. Also, it has very specific manga-ish humor, which can be found in different chibi images of the characters in the background and drawing style even. But the thing that attracts me so harshly to the series is the characters. Characters design, characters arcs, and characters development that already happened in the 4 installments that are presented by now in the market, and I do not regret starting the series, even it's not finished yet, and I honestly don't know how long we should wait for the next part of it, but I'm excited for it, and that was the best sequels to the story, I feel, because after the first book I was so hooked up to the story that I just was reading it for a few days. I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't read anything else, and I had this book hangover after it's ended because I read the first two books in one day, in one evening before going to sleep, and then I had to stop myself and actually go to sleep because I wanted this feeling, you know, of finding your new favorite characters and your new favorite jokes, and being so excited for this slow burn romance, really slow, like the burn isn't there yet. It has so much value to me that I had to stop myself and go to sleep to prolong it to the next day. And the next day I just read the next two issues, like third and fourth books in one evening as well, and that was really great because every book is my favorite, because never there was a kind of a middle book syndrome or something, that never was info dumpy, never had any annoying thing to complain about, you know, because it was so fascinating, so fast paced, at the same time thoughtful, and it had really good balance between hitting on your favorite tropes or tropes you don't know you like but you kind of explore in these books, and between having this and being very unpredictable and having some plot turns and plot twists that just keeps you excited and making you want to read more. Third question is the new release you haven't read yet but want to. It's definitely the fifth installment in Love series. This July, the beginning of July, they released Love the Mastiff, and I'm eager to lend my hands on it. The most anticipated release for the second half of the year, I would say that's 11th volume of Girl from the Other Side by Nagabe, which already is published in Japanese, but as far as I checked, it was not translated to English yet, and I know that it was released in original language in April, but it's not published yet. It's not out there for me to pick, unfortunately. So I stopped my The Girl from the Other Side reading on the sixth volume of this manga, and I will wait probably until the final volume is translated, and then I will just read the remaining 4 volumes. The biggest disappointment, well, there were a lot of disappointments this year, just because it's half a year, because I picked up a whole new genre for myself, and it was a great decision. I don't regret it, but I also did some mistakes in there because I was so eager to explore what's there, and I did not start from the masters of the genre specifically for just having the more broad understanding of what it can offer me. There are many classics of the graphic novel genre that I didn't land my hands on yet. Probably that was a good decision as well, because I found a lot of things that I may not pay attention to if I already was acquainted with such classics and perfections of the whole graphic novel thing. But since I'm looking at the whole graphic novel world with the eyes of a newbie, I feel like it benefits my reading. To be really disappointed at something, you need to first have some kind of expectations, you know, and this author and this particular books were a disappointment because I had certain expectations, and unlike the other works that I didn't like or they just bored me, this one was disappointing, not because it was boring, not because it was awful, even it was, but because I just had certain, you know, perspective on it before coming into it, and it just wasn't there, you know. My idea of this work was better than the work itself, and it was George Simon's Jessica's Farm. Why I even started on George Simon's? Because I was promised that house was a really good thing considering my interest in silent graphic novels. So before reading The House, I decided to read something else from him, and that was a mistake. I even didn't read The House yet because maybe if I read this first, I would not be so disappointed in the other works, but since I decided to kind of climb my way to The House through his other books, that was the biggest mistake I have made this year, because I started with his other book, The Furry Trap. It was not a furry trap, it was furry trash. And then I came to Jessica's Farm, and the description of this project sounds so promising to me. That's why I forgave him my trial and error of going through Furry Trap, and the description of Jessica's Farm was sold to me like this. I will just read you what the project is about. Jessica Farm is an ambitious experiment in world building. Let's notice these words. World building. This book is the first volume of a life-spanning comics project in which he drew one page every month for the past 7 years, starting in January 2000, and will continue this project for 50 years in total, making up the story as he goes and releasing 96-page increments every 8 years until he amasses a 600-page body of work. And before this, the Jessica's Farm is advertised as David Lynch's take on Alice in Wonderland. David Lynch who? Let's be honest, the project sounds really interesting, right? Right. So, let me tell you one thing. It was nothing like Alice in Wonderland for the first place. Okay, there's one panel where the girl is falling down the hole. Not a rabbit hole, but kind of, you know, the hole. That's all. That's all Alice in Wonderland theme or atmosphere it will give you. Secondly, yeah, I understand that's a very, very big project, and he's going there without, you know, having any plot in his mind. And do you know what it shows? There is no plot at the first place, you know. He's not figuring out the plot as he goes. He just had no plot. Because it all started kind of interesting, you know, the idea of it, I liked it. Like, it's a Midwestern house, and it has really creepy things going on. Like, this girl, she's living there with the father, and the father is kind of intimidated and violent, probably. It's the figure that creeps her out, and you start asking these questions, you know, where is her mother? Where are the people around her? Is there any neighbors? Why is this man behaving so weird? Is he really her father? Why she has no friends and no people to speak with? She only speaks with her imaginary kind of people or ghosts or creatures that lives in the house. And the house, it's really, you know, multi-dimensional, because it's look like one thing from the outside and it's a totally other thing from the inside. It has a lot of other rooms and space that is not that it shouldn't be there, and a lot of the creatures, creepy one, friendly one, and they have established relationships with Jessica. There's the one who she should be aware about, the one she pity, the one she have friendship with, and you kind of ask this question like why she created all of these creatures in her head, what's going on in her life, or is it all real? You know, maybe these creatures are existent. But first of all, all of these questions, you know, I ask them, and I'm not sure George Simmons asked them too. You know, I didn't feel that George Simmons cares about anything in this book that is not drawn blood. The first, I would say, 10 or 20 pages in the beginning of the book is Jessica, who is, by the way she's drawn, she's like a teenage girl, and we spent around 20 pages with her in the bathroom while she's just taking a shower, and it's just not, you know, it's not giving us any information, any development, any atmosphere of the book or of the house or of the farm. I don't know why these panels are there, and to think that George Simmons was drawing this teenage girl naked for a dozen of months. Like every month he drew one panel, and all of the panels that year was her taking a bath. It was a strange thought to think about, you know. And the story kind of, it just doesn't have a plot, you know. He's not going there without a plot. He doesn't have it in the first place, and I don't think, like, I didn't feel like there was any initial idea to build any world, to explain anything, to just catch my attention, because I was bored at the middle of the first installment. And when I went to the second installment, because yes, I'm a fool and I read the 2 installments that are available by now for the first 2 decades of 21st century, you know, I was even more disappointed, because then the story kind of go out of the house and started developing on the farm, and what's going on is nothing except blood and violence and just, you know, guts on the ground, open wounds, someone without their head, cutted hands and legs, you know, like it had this absurdist and chaotic feeling to it, but it wasn't the absurdist and chaotic feelings that I love in my books, which I love actually, but this brought more unresolved boredom. And for me personally, the open endings, the strings of the plot that are not, you know, fitting anywhere, and some kind of, you know, something disgusting, something weird, something creepy is thing that I like, especially in graphic form. But he had all of it and it just didn't work for me, so it was a big disappointment. And the next book I read from him, which was Black River, I regret reading it, and I will do a separate, probably a separate rant review for it, or I will include this, my ranty feelings into just, you know, some kind of rant review, because that was something else in a bad way. So this journey had had its you know, lows, but I'm still glad I took this path, and I would say I read much more good and delightful and full of thoughts graphic novels this year, in the number of this 171 graphic novel. Then I read something boring or disappointing or bad. I would say bad, like bad for me, but honestly not only for me, just generally bad graphic novels that I will talk about, but not today, said she after ranting for quite a bit. So the next question is really delightful. It's the biggest surprise you had this year, and I would say, okay, I cannot say this because I wanted to say that it's Snow Glass Apples by Neil Gaiman and Colleen Duran, but I did not classify this book as graphic novel, because for me personally that was wonderfully illustrated fairy tale, but it still was an illustrated fairy tale rather than a graphic novel. So I would say the biggest surprise of 2021 was discovering the Cursed Coyote, duo of artists who was working on The Beautiful Darkness, Satania, Beauty, Miss Don't Touch Me, and I discovered their work from The Beautiful Darkness and I Never Looked Back, and they established quite a standard for how I want my art in the graphic novels to be, because their art is just something else, and I was surprised to find such a graphic perfection. And then I found it again and again and again and again, because I knew where should I look at France to find it. So that was a very pleasant surprise. And of course I can say now about bad surprises, like unpleasant surprises, but I will not. I will save it for another day. Less hot, because when I'm talking about something I really don't like, I'm getting heated, and that's not for today for sure. The next question is the one I can answer with ease, and that's a new favorite author. And this author was new for me, but he's definitely not a new author for the industry, and it's 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸, the author of the most famous silent comics about dinosaurs, which I adored a lot. The newest fictional crush. Whoa, I'm a bit tempted to say Dante Rossi from Fans, because he's a type of characters, type of guy actually I admire in my real life, and in books as well. He is very introverted, productive, kind. He has a face that is not saying you a lot. Inside of it, he is a total cinnamon roll. And I enjoyed his character quite a lot, but since I already mentioned Fans, I would say that would be newest crush. 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸 That's quite a strange crush to have, because that's ancient Rome legionnaire who is really strong, protective killer, warrior. He's very reserved. I think I have a pattern there. The next question is the newest fictional characters that you favor, and that would be, if we were talking about fans, that would be Bobby Rodriguez. But we're not talking about fans, even though for each of this kind of character questions there is an answer from fans, because fans was such a rich book in terms of characters. But I like Bobby Rodriguez because I can see myself in him a bit. He's very ENFP. But if we will take someone else, I would say my new favorite character is the main dinosaurs from Ricardo Delgado's Ancient Egyptians. And yes, that's a weird answer for for this question, but he's a dinosaur and he's a samurai. And you need to read this book to find out what I mean, but that's the truth. That's the truth as the canon of this universe. I really enjoyed it. The next question is the book that made you cry, and quite a lot of books made me cry, and some of the tears were tears of happiness, but I would say the book that made me cry the most was definitely 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸 biography, graphic biography of 𝓫𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓸𝓴𝓼, Indian Queen of Bandits. That was an impressive read. I cried every 10 pages, I guess, and that was a lot. That was a lot in the book. I had the review of this graphic novel in my previous wrap-up, so I recommend you to check it and find out more about this story, and I highly recommend it to pick it up because it's definitely worth it. And the books that made me happy, well, I will cheat on this because before this all the answers to the questions were about graphic novels and my reading journey in terms of my challenge, but I would say books that made me the happiest little girl this year were Beatrix Potter and her Peter the Rabbit. I read 3 installments from this huge series of hers, and of course that's children fairy tales. They are very sweet and innocent and short, but they're illustrated in her specific style, and it just brings so much joy and calmness to my soul that I cannot skip it while talking about books that made me happy, because it did make me happy and it did make me smile widely. Next question is the most beautiful book. I will take a controversial twist on this one because it was Pinocchio by Wenceslas. I cannot recommend this book to anyone because it was disgusting, it was awful, it was full of nasty, violent perversion, and that's a really dark twist on a fairy tale of Pinocchio and also a few others that you can pick up on background of the main plot. Unlike Snow Glass Apples, the art of it is not gorgeous on Colin Durant's term, but it's gorgeous on a different level, you know. It impressed me both plot-wise and artistically, and I loved the addition of it. Last question is books you need to read by the end of the year, and there are a lot of them, but specifically, you know, the ones I want to explore this summer, I presented in my video called My Summer Reading Plans. Meanwhile, I'm saying goodbye to you. It was a really pleasurable tag to make, and I'm kissing you. Goodbye. And I'm gonna do a mid-year book freakout tag, which is basically kind of a wrap-up and for highlights. Wrap-up for highlights? What am I talking about?